Welcome to episode 68 of the High Volume Hiring Podcast. My name is Stephen Rothberg. I am one of the two co-hosts. I'm the founder of College Recruiter. We believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career and that it should be easy and inexpensive for employers to hire them. I am joined here today, as almost always, by my awesome co-host, Jeanette Leeds. Jeanette, good to see you.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I'm Jeanette Leeds. I'm HR tech entrepreneur and advisor and been in the space a long time. And we are so happy today to have David Tell here from Kwal. He is, let's say, you are the founder, co-founder, I'm seeing on the little headline. And really, I would say like an expert in Gen AI and voice. And some of the stuff that you've been doing, David, we've, spoken beforehand is really interesting, especially obviously given our title of our podcast, High Volume, like how it relates to high volume. So welcome. Thrilled you are here. We're in for a treat.
Well, thank you both for having me, both you and Stephen and Jeanette. My name is David Tell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kwal. We started back in 2023, and we're focused on bringing voice agents, which is a type of generative AI technology, to the enterprise. And it's been a really exciting journey so far. And it's amazing to see how much we are able to help both companies and staffing firms accelerate their hiring process.
I love it. And it's so funny. Like, so for everyone's listening, 2023, and obviously Gen AI, we're cutting edge. It's new. Like, it's new, right? It's 2024 right now. So this is like brand new, super cool. You mentioned the word agent, Gen AI agent. Like, tell us what is that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There's a lot of definitions out there about what an agent is, but I think there's three things that most people will tell you constitutes an agent. One is access to tools would be the first thing. So can the agent go and call another API or another find out the weather, take an action to an external tool. The second piece would be the access to knowledge, so like long-term memory, things like that. Also, external data sources that might be within an employer's database would be another example of accessing knowledge. And then the third part is the logic layer, which can also include things like planning and reasoning. So determining what to execute before the actual execution happens. So those are the things that I would say constitutes agentic technology. And if you look what just happened yesterday or the day before with Llama 3, and Mark Zuckerberg talking about this, a lot of what we're seeing in generative AI is becoming this idea of compound systems or agents, right? They're not just a single model. It's actually multiple things are happening within a model or within a slew of different models.
So I want to understand a couple things. So first of all, before we went live, you shared a couple things with us. One is I think that the viewers will be probably in finding is as interesting as Jen and I did where the name Kwal came from. So share that with us if you would.
Yeah, the name Kwal. Well, one, it's a verb, which I really like. So that's one reason why we decided, we want to Kwal people. But no, the reality is it's a mix of the idea of having a quality call. And Kwal was really it's an offspring of sorts from the first business that I started that's still running at Tascam, where we actually had to interview lots of people globally for effectively what's a talent marketplace. And we tried a lot of different tools, texting, video interviews, and it just never felt like it had that quality experience. And that's sort of, the genesis for how the company sort of came about.
Cool. And so the quality call is, if I understand correctly, is really well designed for like a high volume kind of situation. Maybe you're hiring for call centers and you want to be able to kind of go back and forth in a natural way, not the old fashioned voicemail system, like, say one to do whatever, and then it never ends. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, most of the roles that we serve today are things like customer support, light industrial, nursing would be another example, still high volume. Specific types of IT roles, I would say also as another sort of category. Construction would be another one. So, you can look at it as things that are what maybe people will call blue collar or early stage white collar, gray collar type of roles.
Very cool. So I know one of the things we also were talking about right before, I feel like we're bringing the listeners on into like the green room beforehand, was the idea of, how do you personalize a lot of this stuff and the conversations depending where you are in the country. So maybe you could share a bit around some of the examples that you've been working on, because I just love that from a story standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of generative AI and of course agent type behaviors is that it allows for a very high degree of personability at the candidate level. So, today when we think about tech systems that have existed for a long time, they're typically like pre-programmed like workflow builders, right? Where like if this, then that, and then you have some like canned response, and maybe they'll throw in the name of the person and things like that. But now with agents, right, and agent architectures, you have this history of the person, you know where they are, and we all know large language models are really, really good at using different tones, right, in terms of dialogue generation. Like talk to somebody like like they're from the office, right? And you can all of a sudden when it has a dialogue with you, you notice that the dialogue is a little bit different. And so if you think about the dialogue level, these things are very capable of already doing that. And then you add the voice layer, right, where we synthesize the voice. And I think that's the next layer that's really interesting, because now the dialogue can sound just like you're talking to somebody in West Texas if you're from West Texas. But now the voice also sounds like somebody you're talking to that actually sounds like they're from West Texas. And I think that's going to be really, really powerful moving forward to provide, really personalized experience, even though it's high volume. And typically it's not something that when people sometimes think about high volume, they don't think about personalization. It's sort of like this weird like dichotomy that you can now sort of merge these things together with generative AI.
I think it's so cool being from, I think many people know I grew up in New Jersey, live in New York. So I'm like,
I couldn't have told from the way you said New Jersey that you grew up in New Jersey. That was a shock.
Over the years. But if we're hiring a bunch of people in Jersey for whatever, like, again, you want to make that person like versus, as you said, someone in Texas, right? It's a different, not just even way of talking, but the accent and whatnot. So being able to just have that be a part of it is just very cool. Big fan.
Yeah. So if I understand, I want to build on that if I can, Jeanette. Just before we went live, you kind of played like a English language with a Quebecois accent, which I grew up in Canada. I can't hear it, but I've been told it so many times I believe it, that the accent that you hear in Quebec is different than the accent that you hear in France. And people in France will tell me there's a difference between somebody in like the Bordeaux area versus somebody in, in Paris or whatever. So if I'm somebody who's calling in for one of the roles that like one of your clients is trying to hire for, how does the system know what dialect, or accent or voice to use for me?
So if in general, these systems will know, right, and where the location of the person is. So effectively, that's one way that would work. The other way you could do it is theoretically off of area code, which is less specific, right? Because people move and they keep their old number.
Yeah.
So, typically you're going to want to either have that data up front of their actual location, or you're making sort of an educated guess off of area codes, which are not that specific. And then there's other ways you can sort of do that through, going back to tools, right? You could execute a search and say, hey, like, tell me everything you know about Jeanette, and then sort of make some educated guess. In the world of agents, that's possible.
I think we have time for one more question. Do you want to grab it, Jeanette?
We do. Give us a story. I'm like big on stories this summer, of, where you've seen this, work with one of your clients, or just something interesting that will leave our listeners being like, that was a good story. That's interesting. How's that for a blanket?
Yeah.
Story, David.
Use generative AI to write the.
Exactly.
in terms of more like a usage story or more of like a funny story? Okay.
Yeah, I think like a use case, like something that, you know, our listeners and those that are in TA can, you know, really think about, this is something, you know, how can I be aware of how I can think about just Gen AI, voice agents, all of this as part of their future roadmap.
Yeah, I think one thing I've talked to a lot of people about this, and it's definitely something that I've worked with a client on before, which is the idea of like open funnel, right? Because in the world now we have these resumes, and the resumes can be created. There's so many resume generation tools, right? And it can be so personalized for the job. It'd be very hard for employers to sort of sort through more and more and more of these resumes as they just continue to grow. And so one thing that I've been working on with clients and goes to success story is like they had over 8,000, you know, applicants per week, right? Which is quite a few.
That's a lot.
And they, you know, they're expecting more. Primarily professional type of jobs, like I said, not like director of engineering or those types of roles, but more, you know, junior to mid-level type of roles. And you know, they've sort of adopted this sort of open funnel approach, which is to say like, hey, we're just going to accept that it's going to be impossible to sort of detect, you know, people, you know, I don't want to call it resume fraud, but effectively like elongating what's on a resume.
Right.
And so you need to really have like a combat mechanism. You know, I don't want to call it fraud detection, but you need some more sort of mechanism. And I think that's where voice for them, they believe it plays a role. But there's also a secondary portion of this, which is, and we talked about this before the podcast started, which is Indeed is very expensive. Job boards are very expensive. So if you sort of have an open funnel approach, you're actually collecting a lot of data. And once you have that data, you can effectively make searches and then reach out to people. And so you actually spend less on the advertising side over time. So I think it's not quite widely adopted, I think, just yet.
Yeah.
But I think that's the trend that we're seeing. So I don't know if that was a good story, but I hope that tied enough different pieces.
Yeah, no, that was great. It's I mean, listen, where organizations can save money, be more efficient. I mean, that's like, you know, do things better candidate experience, all of the above, right, is all harnessed within.
And I think too, I think also, Jeanette, it seems to me like this provides the employer with the opportunity to kind of be more inclusive at a really low cost.
Yeah.
Like 8,000 people applying a week, to interview all of those people, in some roles, the resumes are just crap, right? And it's like really hard to tell who's qualified, who's not. Tell me why you're qualified. Like when we interview people at College Recruiter, one of the questions we always ask is, why did you apply to work for us? Not this role, not why are you interested in this industry or whatever, but us.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how the candidates that we think are going to be better, more serious, that then will assess better, they know they've done their homework.
Yeah.
And I think that this tool can, you know, you can interview 8,000 people in, you know, half an hour.
Yeah. And we do it primarily, our mechanism is through the phone too, which is sort of a natural source for people. You know, they don't have to look at a screen. They could, you know, in theory, be driving in their car, right? They don't have to be dressed up. And so I think that's also like another thing too. There's not, you know, some sort of website they have to go to. We just completely interface with them in the device that they use the most every single day, which is the phone.
Exactly. We all have it here.
So
I mean, yeah. Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, David, this has been really great. I'll put the little caption up there so anybody want to reach out to you. I assume LinkedIn's a good place, and you can talk with them more about Gen AI voice agents and Kwal specifically. This was super.
Awesome. Thank you both, Stephen and Jeanette, for having me. And yeah, I'm available if anybody is interested. You put my LinkedIn, but my email is david@kwal.ai. So thank you all for having me.
Easy. Good
Awesome
stuff.
Alrighty.
Cheers, David.
Have a great day, everyone.
Till next time, Jeanette.
Bye.